Hello and welcome to the channel. Today what we're going to talk about is an exciting new feature found in Azure Logic Apps Standard that allows you to resubmit from a particular action. Let's go. Alright, so why is this episode important? So this is actually a long-standing ask. I know I've seen this in the Power Platform space, also naturally in Logic Apps as well. And resubmitting transactions within your iPaaS platform or even just your automation platform is kind of a standard requirement. And both Logic Apps and Power Automate have that resubmit functionality, which is quite useful. Now, one of the challenges with it is that it always restarts from the top. So if you have certain actions that you don't want to replay, that becomes a bit of an issue. But this feature is quite useful when you have a downstream system that is offline and you need to reprocess the transactions. Maybe you've got a bug in your workflow. Maybe you have a bug in a destination system, and ultimately there's going to be some rework in order to sort of achieve the desired result. And so there might be some situations where you don't want to resubmit the entire workflow, especially if reprocessing can lead to duplicates. So like perhaps you have a situation where you need to update multiple tables, and maybe the first call is successful but the second call is not. Now what do? If you reprocess the entire workflow instance, you could end up creating duplicate data, which isn't a good place to be. So we have this new feature. It is technically called submit from this action, and it allows you to reprocess a transaction at a particular point in time of the workflow. Now, this could be a successful or an unsuccessful resubmission, kind of up to you. You have that full control over how it will be reprocessed. Now, just as a precaution, this is in public preview, so just be aware of that. It is available for stateflow workflows only, which does kind of make sense. If you think about stateless workflows, we're not persisting run history, so we don't have any sort of mechanism to go ahead and resubmit from a specific action. And this, of course, is available in Logic Apps Standard. So what are a few scenarios that we could use this for? So one is that approvals, and that's part of this demo, where maybe you need to go ahead and request a discount. You send that off to an approval, and then basically you get the response, and provided it's approved, then you go ahead and perform some downstream actions. Well, what if one of those downstream actions fails, and it's a technical issue? You don't want to reprocess everything and then have these approvals again, especially if you're resubmitting those to like an executive. They're like, why am I getting all this noise? And they're not going to be happy. Another scenario is coordinating system of records. So sort of an example I've seen in the past is you've got like a work order management system, and that could be, say like an IBM Maximo, and then you need to retrieve some data from that system to then send to SAP. Now, you need these, like the data to link up. Kind of think of it like a foreign key. Well, what happens if, say, your work order management system is returning you bad data, and now you need to go ahead and submit to, say, your ERP? Now, what do you go ahead and do? So you might have a situation where you need to go back into the system of record, change some data, and then be able to go ahead and resubmit. And so I think that's a good valid scenario. And then another good, and obviously there's more than just three, but these are some of the ones that are sort of more prevalent, is when you have outages, whether it's planned or unplanned outages downstream, and you need to reprocess records, and maybe you don't want to reprocess the entire workflow instance itself. So we're also looking for feedback. This is in public preview, and so are things like resubmit with payload of interest to you? Like we do resubmit from payload basically at the top of the workflow, but is that also useful mid-workflow? So kind of like a repair and resubmit type scenario. What about resubmitting from multiple locations? Like could you have a complex workflow where you need to resubmit from here and here? And if there's other scenarios, please let us know. Go ahead, put that in the comments itself. Now, this is public preview. We know there might be some scenarios that aren't supported. One is parallel branching, and that is something that we'll continue to work through over time. All right, so let's get into a demo. As I mentioned before, it's going to be an approval process demo where basically after we have an approval, we don't want to reprompt for that approval if we've already got it, if we have a downstream system issue. So that's what's going to happen over here. We do have this HTTP call that's going to call a backend system, and if that has failed, and now we know the system is back up, we can just submit from this action instead of annoying our approver. So let's jump into the demo. Okay, so I've got two workflows. I've got the main one, which is approval. Let's look at this first. Nothing overly complicated, but just to illustrate the capability. So we've got an inbound HTTP request. We're going to get a few values in, the customer ID, the discount value, the amount. We're then going to send this off to an approver. We're going to send an adaptive card. I've just gone ahead and used this adaptivecards.io/designer and just modified the default sample. Go ahead, copy the card payload out, and then basically paste it into your Teams action. And this is going to be post an adaptive card and wait for response. I've got a full video on this. Go ahead and search the channel if you're looking for that. Now, assuming we get the approval, we're then going to go ahead and send a request off to another system. Now, in this case, I'm just using a child logic app or another logic app workflow that allows me to sort of mimic this quite easily. We're going to pass some values in. We're then going to get the response. We're going to go ahead and parse the response. And then we're just going to indicate that we've got this that we've got this approval, and this is the particular status. Now, in the other workflow, it is just going to be called process discount. Once again, super simple. The point is really focusing on the submit from action, not sort of the logistics of implementing this. But basically, all we're going to do is get a request and then send a response back out. So this particular workflow is currently, let's just refresh this, in a disabled state. And that's kind of what we want at this point. And then let's head over to this particular workflow. And what we're going to do, we are going to run with payload. And so here, instead of pulling out Postman, which is a great tool, we can just go ahead and paste in a sample message body that we want to send into this particular workflow. So let's go ahead, let's do that. And then let's check out the monitoring view. Okay, so what we can see right now is we're currently awaiting for our approver to respond to the Teams message. So here, let's just drag this in. We've got the adaptive card. We're just going to approve the request, and then that's great. Let's come back over to our workflow. Let's hit refresh, and we can see that we do have our approval. But now when we go ahead and call our HTTP endpoint, we have an issue, right? We see that it's not enabled. So it's a failure, which is fine. If we right mouse click on our failure, we can go ahead and resubmit from this particular action. Now, I'm not going to do that yet because we need to enable that workflow for this to actually be fixed. But that's how we can go ahead and do this. Now, for some reason, if we wanted to resubmit from here, we could, but that would result in sending that request again, which is not what we want to do. And so what ends up happening with this is that if you choose to submit from midway in your workflow, we're going to go ahead and use all of the outputs from previous actions. And basically, like, those are immutable, right? So those aren't being changed. We're not going to contact those systems. So we're going to use the same data, and we're then going to go ahead and pick up from this particular location. Now, I'm sure you're asking what happens to your run history, and I will show you that once we get to that point. So let's head over to our other workflow, and let's go ahead and enable it. This will take a few seconds, and then we'll be in good shape. All right, so we can now see that that is enabled. Now, the other thing just to note, because I've implemented try catch, you will see like all of the statuses being successful, basically because I am swallowing that basically exception. But like if I didn't have that exception handler, or even if I say basically, stopped terminated the instance and then said the status was failed, that will reflect properly. So do be aware of that. I've just tried to use try catch just so that you could see like the behavior of using scopes for your try catch. So if we come back to this particular instance, we see we've got our HTTP call. Let's go ahead, let's right mouse click and then click submit from this action. This will take just a moment or two, and then we'll see this being replayed basically before our eyes. Let's go ahead, let's just hit the refresh button, and here we can see that it was successfully sent. Now, what you will notice is like there is a slight, difference in color. And basically what that means is that this was not replayed. We went ahead and used the outputs from this basically downstream. And so like these would be new inputs as well. Technically the trigger, I suspect this is something we'll fix, but the trigger was not like reprocessed. We used the same message body that was basically presented to us the first time. So technically that should probably be this color as well. But here we've got basically all of the success for the remaining downstream actions. And, if we come back to our run history, we'll see that, if we come back, hit refresh, then we'll see the new record, and we'll see that all of these were processed successfully. The original request, that doesn't change, right? That's still going to show a failure. So what ends up happening is that there is a new run. There is a new instance ID behind the run. So technically, when you do submit from here, you are creating a new instance of that workflow. You're just going to go ahead and use the outputs from that previous instance, and that's really the difference. But you will see, let's flip back here, right? We do have unique IDs here. Like this is 5291, and this is like 69442. So these are unique runs from that perspective. All right, well, thanks for checking out this video. There's more to come. There's some exciting stuff coming down the pipeline here, so do expect another batch of videos here in the next month or so, because we've got lots of exciting things to share. I am still on Twitter. I do post there semi-frequently, so go ahead and find me there at Weirzy. You're obviously on YouTube. Go ahead, like, subscribe, comment. As I mentioned before, if there's particular scenarios that you're interested in with respect to resubmit from this action, do let us know. As this is preview, that's the point of preview, is to get feedback so that we can go ahead and make adjustments prior to a general availability of a feature. So thanks again.